All right, so these were some bizarre camping murders of these two teens you're seeing on your screen, Pandora Kjolsrud and Evan Clark. They were 17 and 18 years old. They went to Arcadia High School here in the Phoenix area, and they were camping in May at a place called Mount Ord. It's in the Tonto National Forest. It's a popular camping spot. You can kind of pull off on the areas where you can camp in your car, and that's what these two were doing. So they go to this camping trip. It was just supposed to be an overnight trip. And Pandora's mom, Simone, had her location. The two teens got there. They were sending pictures to their parents. Hey, look, we've made it. We're doing some hiking up the mountain. We're going to spend the night. And there were other people camping in the area as well. But they were supposed to come back the next morning. And when neither of their parents heard from them, Pandora's mom checked her Life 360 app, which had Pandora's location, and saw that it was still at Mount Ord. She thought that was really weird, so she called authorities, and at the time, that went to the Gila County Sheriff's Office. So they sent out a deputy to see where the kids were. And that deputy gets there and sees this kind of odd scene. They're able to locate Evan's car, the Mercedes that the two took up, but something looks off. Only one of the doors is unlocked, and he noticed that there was blood on the back bumper. And so he calls in backup, and they start looking for the teens because you got this car. They can see that this blood, and it looks off. And when they go into the car, they realize there's also a bloody pillowcase. So now it's like, what happened in this car, around this car, and where are Pandora and Evan? Well, they start to notice that on the ground there were these drag marks that look like something or somebody had been dragged. And they start following those off of the trail. And that's where they find Pandora and Evan both dead, off the trail, shot multiple times. Now, this is weird because off the bat, you're thinking this is pretty remote. Is this a murder-suicide? No. They were both shot multiple times. It was clear off the bat that this was not a murder-suicide. And so who would have shot them? And in this day and age, what makes an investigation go so much faster is technology, surveillance footage, GPS location, all of that stuff. A lot of that wasn't either in the area because it was a remote camping area. So there weren't just surveillance cameras or Ring doorbell cameras. And the cell phone service was in and out. So yeah, Pandora's mom had her location, but it wasn't perfectly accurate. So trying to figure out who was in the area and what actually happened was extremely difficult. So for months, in Arizona, this case kind of went cold. And we had known about it, and we knew that the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office was investigating it because where their bodies were, they actually assumed the jurisdiction over Gila County. So when MCSO took over, we're used to working with MCSO. And it was one of those weird ones where it was like, this is odd. We don't know what's going on. From a public perspective, from a media perspective, we didn't know what leads that they had. In fact, they were asking the community for help. So we thought there might be nothing new. But then during this show last Thursday, there was a surprise arrest in the case. And all of a sudden, MCSO was posting on their YouTube page that they had made an arrest of 31-year-old Thomas Brown. So we start learning about Thomas Brown in real time as this show's going on and into the night, trying to figure out who is this guy and did the teens know him. So we start learning a little bit more once we get court paperwork into Thomas Brown and he's processed within the jail. And we learn that this guy lives in Chandler, and turns out he had inserted himself into the investigation. You can see him here. This is when he was arrested and getting processed into the county jail here in Phoenix. This guy was camping at the time that the teens were, and the reason that detectives knew that was because he had actually inserted himself in the investigation right away. He went to detectives and said, hey, this is crazy. I have drone footage of the area. I was there camping first with my wife and our dog Snoopy, but my wife left on that first day, and I stayed behind to camp one day longer. So he had actually tried to be helpful to detectives. And in looking at his social media, we were able to find his Facebook page, his Reddit page. He posted about this camping trip. He showed pictures of him and his dog Snoopy. talking about being out there, that there was some other group that was playing loud music nearby that was kind of annoying. I don't believe it was Evan and Pandora. There was another group of 5 campers that were in the area that had some contact with this guy. And then he posted about the crime itself. And he said how this was terrible and devastating news, how him and Snoopy had been out there at the time, and that how tragic it was that these young teens were just getting their adult lives started. So it wasn't a surprise to detectives that he was out there and that his DNA could be out there, but things were a little off. They ended up finding bloody gloves that were also dropped at the crime scene. And they also found other evidentiary pieces that were kind of scattered around. Well, Thomas Brown tells detectives that he did come along Evan and Pandora's belongings while he was hiking, saw them, kind of picked up what was like an air rifle and some other items, but put them back and left them there. My guess is he said that and told them that because that would then put his DNA in the area. But what Thomas Brown didn't know was that his DNA was on those bloody gloves, and his DNA was also in Evan's car. And this directly tied him to what MCSO believes is the murder suspect. Now, he also has an interesting background that plays a big role in this. Those two were shot multiple times. Thomas Brown is a military veteran. He was part of the National Guard. And since then, he got out in 2022. He now owns a business of 3D printing military rifle accessories for guns. That's what he does. He prints them, he creates them, and he sells them. And he has videos on his social media pages of using those kind of style of accessories that he makes. But we don't know what the actual murder weapon was. We know it was some sort of gun, but MCSO detectives remained really tight-lipped about what the actual weapon was. And did that involve any of his 3D printed rifle accessories? We don't know that right now. Everything's being looked at, but that does complicate the investigation in terms of how you track something like that because it's just not the same as a regular gun. So I want to play you some sound from Captain David Lee of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, who was describing the investigation, because the big question here is, what happened? Why would Thomas Brown have brutally killed 2 teens? Was there a motive? He addresses where they are in the investigation right now.
But at this time, we do not have any information to suggest that there was any evidence of any connection between Evan Clark, Pandora Kjolsrud, and Thomas Brown. We're unaware of any allegation that Evan and Pandora's action or conduct contributed to their deaths. At this time, the information we have suggested that Brown acted alone and that there was no further danger to the community from him.
Are you guys looking into his work in terms of 3D printed guns?
We're looking into everything. Generally speaking, 3D printed weapons, it's not something that functions the way a weapon that one of us carries at work, where it's repeatable, it's reliable, it continues to work. It's usually something that's got just a couple shots in it, and it's not really capable of continuing to fire, reloading quickly, things like that. And that's just generally speaking. As far as the weapon, I can't speak to whether or not that is what was used.
Now, I've talked to MCSO a little bit more. It does seem that that's not a main part of their investigation in terms of what they're looking at crucially right now. So it's very possible it was not a 3D printed accessory that was on the gun, but it is weird. We don't know if they even have the murder weapon. So there's a lot of unknown here. Police also were able to make contact with 5 campers who were also next to Thomas Brown, and they thought he was acting strange and weird. But of course, we see this all the time. People acting strange and weird isn't a crime. So they didn't call in anything because they didn't know what was going on, nor did they hear anything out of sorts. After that press conference, I then went to Thomas Brown's home in Chandler, Arizona. And this was an interesting experience. For one thing, we know that Thomas's wife was with him at least one of the days camping at Mount Ord. So I wanted to know what she knew. We reached out to her, calling, texting, didn't hear back. And that's understandable and honestly to be expected. So we wanted to go see where he lived, and did neighbors know anything about Thomas Brown? knocked on their door, and an older man answered the door. He was very kind. He did say this was Thomas and his wife's home, said they were not there. Obviously, Thomas was in custody, but the wife was not there. Identified himself as a family member, but not as Thomas's dad, and said that they had no comment. The dog that was at the door was the exact same dog that was in all the pictures, Snoopy, with Thomas Brown that he had posted from that camping trip. So that was a strikeout in terms of the actual home and anybody talking there. But on either side of that house, multiple neighbors came out to talk to us. The first ones were super confused, so much so that they actually thought we must have been talking about the old neighbors there because that guy was super nice. And at first we thought maybe it was an old neighbor. But when I pulled up his mugshot, that seemed to rattle them. They were like, no, that's him. So I went then to the other next door neighbor, and this is where I learned a whole lot more. She was super nice, did not want to go on camera, but said that she was absolutely stunned by his arrest and said I could quote her on, quote, I would trust him with myself. She was friends with him and his wife and was like, this is outrageous. Like, we really can't fathom him doing anything like this. And she said, innocent until proven guilty, but that this was probably the most shocking thing that she had heard. She actually watched the police cars in the area. They came and got him. He was then in the back of that deputy's car as they were taking him into custody, and she was just bewildered by this whole thing. And so that was interesting too, because, people have said in his mugshot, he's got kind of that dead look in his eyes, a lot like Brian Kohberger in the Idaho 4 college student's murder. And a lot of people have kind of compared it to that. Like, what would be a motive to take these kids' lives? And this doesn't make sense. But in Brian Kohberger's case, he was acting weird all the time. And people attested to that he was, angry towards females and made people feel uncomfortable. In this case, I was shocked that the neighbors said, this guy is pure and clean and we love him. Like, this is crazy. And so it's hard for people right now because we have no idea what happened. And if MCSO doesn't believe that there was any sort of argument or that Evan and Pandora did something to set him off, it really begs the question of what was going through his head at the time, if he did do this, and how did it escalate to a point like that? They wouldn't comment on Thomas Brown's mental health. I don't know if that's going to become part of this case, but that was something that MCSO purposefully did not touch on. And so now we're waiting for any sort of details to come out as to how this happened. And I think it might be similar to the Kohberger case in that we may never get those details. We did request a jailhouse interview with Thomas Brown. He declined. I'm not surprised. I also messaged him, trying to get a hold of him. Haven't heard back. So there is a lot of mystery and tragedy that surrounds this case right now. And as we were learning things about the suspect, we're keeping the victims front of mind. And I mean, this is just a horrific situation. These two teens who just were trying to camp and enjoy their night are killed. And at the press conference, Pandora's mom, Simone, was also there. She bravely got up and spoke about her daughter and the case. And I want to play what she had to say about there being an arrest and how she wants her daughter to be remembered.
My daughter, Pandora, was a beautiful, brilliant light in this world. She was so full of life and joy and love. She was the type of person you never forget after meeting her. But the light and love and beauty she gave us will be in our hearts forever. And the darkness that she encountered on that day when she met her killer will not define her life. His darkness will never overcome her light. Over the past 4 months, I have prayed every day that her killer would eventually be brought to justice. My daughter's life matters, and I look forward to the day the perpetrator is convicted and punished for his crimes. That's all I have to say.
It was super brave of her to get up there, address all the media, knowing that people were going to have so many questions and she has to relive this every time she has to talk about it. We also had one of our reporters talk to Evan Clark's mom on the phone, who said she was so thankful that this person is now off the street and that Evan was the light of her life. I just can't imagine what these families are going through, and still so much confusion as to why. And maybe if they ever got an answer, it wouldn't matter, because it wouldn't take away the pain of the fact that this happened at all. But what happened out there? And are we going to find out? That's what we need to know. So we're going to be staying on top of this case for sure as it unravels itself in the criminal justice system, and hopefully learn more about what Thomas Brown allegedly did. And if this will go to trial or will end in some sort of plea deal, we'll definitely be following it through to the end.